Welcome to IELTS Self-Peep MasterPrep, your trusted source for real exam-based practice tests. Every test you see here is inspired by current exam trends, and each one comes with full model solutions to help you master every section. Here's our daily schedule. IELTS tests drop every morning at 7:30 a.m. Eastern, and CLP tests every evening at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. No matter which exam you're preparing for, we've got you covered every single day. Are you ready for today's test? Give it your best shot and comment your score. The top 5 scorers will be featured in our monthly Achievers newsletter and awards. Want your name included? Let's begin.
Section 1. You will hear a woman reporting a lost item to a train station lost property office. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 10. Now listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 10.
Good morning. Lost Property Office, how can I help you?
Oh, hello. Yes, I'm ringing because I think I left something on a train this morning. I'm rather hoping someone's handed it in.
Right, well, let me take down some details and we'll see what we can do. Can I start with your name, please?
Yes, of course. It's Catherine Holloway. That's Holloway.
Holloway, lovely. And could I take your address, Mrs. Holloway?
It's Miss, actually. I'm at 27, Maple Drive, in Headington.
27 Maple Drive. And do you have the postcode handy?
Yes, it's OX4, 7PL.
OX4, 7PL, got it. Now, could you describe the item you've lost?
Well, it's a briefcase, a leather briefcase. It's not very big, sort of medium-sized, I'd say.
A leather briefcase. And what color would that be?
It's, dark brown. Quite a rich color, actually, with brass buckles on the front.
Dark brown with brass buckles, right. Now I need to know a bit about your journey. What time was your train?
Let me think. I caught the 9:45. Yes, that's right, the 9:45 service.
The 9:45. And where were you travelling from?
I got on at Paddington. London Paddington.
Paddington, fine. And that service goes through to Reading, was it, or further?
No, I was going all the way to Oxford. I normally get off at the main station there.
Oxford, right you are. Now, do you happen to remember which carriage you were sitting in? It does help us narrow things down considerably.
Yes, I believe so. I walked quite far along the platform. I'm fairly sure it was carriage 7. I remember because I thought it was my lucky number, which is a bit ironic now.
Yes indeed. Carriage 7. Now, this is an important one. Was there anything valuable inside the briefcase?
Yes, that's really what I'm most worried about. There's a silver laptop in there. It's got all my work files on it, presentations, that sort of thing. There were also some paper documents, but it's really the laptop I need back.
A silver laptop, understood. I'll flag that as a high-value item. Now, finally, What's the best way to reach you if we find it? Would you prefer us to ring you or send an email?
Oh, on my mobile phone, definitely. I'm out and about most of the day, so I might miss a landline call. The number is 07941 385206.
07941 385206. Brilliant! So we'll contact you by mobile phone. Well, Miss Holloway, I've logged all of that. Items from this morning's services usually come in by early afternoon, so I'd say give us until about 3 o'clock.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your help.
Not at all. Fingers crossed we'll have good news for you shortly. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
That is the end of section 1. You now have some time to check your answers to section 1. Section 2. You will hear a community center manager describing activity programs and rooms. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 20. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 20.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Riverside Community Center. My name is Karen Whitfield, and I'm the center manager here. Thank you all for coming along to our open day. I'd like to take you through what we offer and give you a tour of our facilities. First of all, let me give you a bit of background. The center was originally built in 1992 as a library, but it was converted into a community center in 2014. Since then, we've expanded considerably. We now have over 3,000 registered members, which is something we're very proud of. Now, one question people always ask is about parking. We do have a car park, but it's quite small, only 25 spaces. However, the good news is that the council recently agreed to let our members use the supermarket car park across the road free of charge on weekdays, so that's been a real help. Let me tell you about some of our most popular programs. Our yoga classes run every Tuesday and Thursday evening, and they're led by a fully qualified instructor called Priya Sharma. These classes were actually voted the most popular activity in our annual survey last year. What makes them stand out is that they cater for all ability levels. We have beginners and advanced participants in separate groups. Then we have our pottery workshop, which takes place on Wednesday mornings. Now, this one does require you to bring your own apron, but all materials and tools are provided by the center. The workshop is limited to 12 participants per session to ensure everyone gets enough individual attention from the tutor. For those of you interested in fitness, we launched a new program last month called Active Seniors. Despite the name, it's actually open to anyone over the age of 50. It focuses on low-impact exercises designed to improve balance and flexibility rather than strength. Sessions are held every Monday and Friday morning in the main hall. Now, regarding membership fees, our standard annual membership costs £45, which gives you access to all regular programs. However, if you sign up today during the open day, you'll receive a 15% discount, bringing it down to just over £38. Let me now describe some of our rooms. We have 4 main spaces. The garden room on the ground floor was recently refurbished with new lighting and air conditioning. It's our most modern space and is mainly used for private hire events such as birthday parties and meetings. Upstairs, there's the Oak Room, which has just had a brand new sound system installed. That's where all our music and dance classes are held. Next to it is the Willow Room, which is the smallest of our spaces but has wonderful natural light thanks to its large skylights. We use it primarily as an art studio. And finally, there's the main hall, the Maple Hall. This is by far our largest room and can seat up to 200 people. It's currently undergoing some renovation work on the flooring, which we expect to be completed by mid-May. Until then, some activities that normally take place there have been temporarily moved to the Oak Room. Right, well, if you'd like to follow me, I'll take you round and show you the spaces in person. Please feel free to ask any questions as we go.
That is the end of Section 2. You now have some time to check your answers to Section 2. Section 3. You will hear a student and tutor reviewing a report on consumer behavior. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 30. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 30.
Thanks for meeting us, Dr. Evans. We wanted to go over the feedback on our consumer behavior report before the final submission.
Of course, Tom. I've read through the draft carefully. Let's start with the overall focus. What was the main aim of your report?
Well, initially we thought about examining advertising trends, but we ended up focusing on how emotional triggers influence purchasing decisions. We felt that was more original.
Good choice. The emotional angle gave you much richer material to work with. Now, regarding your methodology, I noticed you used a combination of surveys and interviews. Why did you settle on that approach rather than purely quantitative methods?
We actually started with just surveys, but the responses felt too shallow. So we added interviews because they allowed participants to explain the reasoning behind their choices in more depth.
That's sensible. The qualitative data really strengthened the analysis. Sarah, how did you handle the literature review section?
That was honestly the most challenging part of the whole project. There's so much published research on consumer psychology that narrowing it down was incredibly difficult. I spent weeks just selecting which sources were relevant enough to include.
I can imagine. You've cited over 40 sources, which is impressive. Now, one thing I want to raise, your section on brand loyalty. I felt it needed further investigation. You mention several theories but don't fully test them against your own data.
Yes, we ran out of time on that section. We know it needs more research to properly connect the theory to our findings. We'll revise that before the deadline.
Good. Now let's discuss the data collection phase. How long did that take compared to your original plan?
It took much longer than planned, actually. We'd scheduled 3 weeks, but it ended up taking nearly 6 because recruiting participants for the interviews was really slow.
That's a common issue. It's worth mentioning in your reflections section. Now, what about the statistical analysis? Who handled that?
I did most of it. We used regression analysis to identify the strongest emotional predictors of impulse buying. Price sensitivity came out as less important than we'd expected. It was the sense of urgency created by limited time offers that had the greatest impact on impulse purchases.
That's a fascinating finding. Did you consider any alternative explanations for that result?
We did. We thought social media exposure might be a confounding variable, so we controlled for that in a secondary analysis, and the urgency effect still held up strongly.
Excellent. That shows good critical thinking. Now, your case study of the online retailer, I thought that was better than expected, actually. The way you linked real sales data to your theoretical framework was very well done.
Thank you. We were lucky the company agreed to share anonymized transaction records. That made a huge difference.
Indeed. One last point, your recommendations chapter. You suggest that retailers should use personalized messaging. What evidence supports that specifically?
Our interview data showed that 70% of participants responded more positively to tailored communications than to generic advertisements. We argue that personalization builds an emotional connection which then drives repeat purchases.
Strong argument. Overall, I'd say the report is in good shape. Just address the brand loyalty gaps, tighten up the reflections, and you should be ready for final submission.
That's really helpful. We'll get those revisions done this week. Thanks, Dr. Evans.
That is the end of Section 3. You now have some time to check your answers to Section 3. Section 4. You will hear university lecture on the psychology of decision-making under uncertainty. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to explore the psychology of decision-making under uncertainty, a topic that sits at the intersection of cognitive psychology and behavioral economics. Humans face uncertain situations on a daily basis, yet our brains are remarkably ill-equipped to handle them rationally. Over the next 40 minutes or so, I'll walk you through some of the key theories and cognitive mechanisms that shape the choices we make when outcomes are unpredictable. Let's begin with the foundational work of Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, whose prospect theory, published in 1979, revolutionized our understanding of risky choice. One of their central findings was that people evaluate outcomes not in absolute terms but relative to a reference point, typically their current situation. Crucially, they demonstrated that losses carry more psychological weight than equivalent gains, a phenomenon known as loss aversion. This asymmetry in how we perceive gains and losses has profound implications. For instance, investors frequently hold onto declining stocks far too long because selling would crystallize a loss. Kahneman and Tversky also showed that when people face potential gains, they tend to become risk-averse. They prefer a guaranteed moderate reward over a gamble with a higher expected value. However, when facing potential losses, individuals shift towards risk-seeking behavior, willing to gamble to avoid a certain loss. This reversal is driven largely by emotion rather than logic. Now, building on that, I want to discuss heuristics, the mental shortcuts our brains use to simplify complex decisions. One of the most well-documented is the availability heuristic, where people judge the probability of an event based on how easily examples come to mind. After seeing extensive media coverage of plane crashes, for example, many people dramatically overestimate the frequency of aviation disasters. A related shortcut is the anchoring effect. When people are exposed to an initial number or piece of information, their subsequent estimates tend to stay close to that anchor, even when it's completely arbitrary. In one famous experiment, participants were asked to spin a wheel that landed on either 10 or 65, then estimate the percentage of African countries in the United Nations. Those who saw 65 gave significantly higher estimates. Finally, there's the representativeness heuristic, in which people judge the likelihood of something by how closely it matches a stereotype or prototype, often ignoring relevant base rate statistical information altogether. The third area I'd like to address is overconfidence, arguably one of the most pervasive biases in decision-making under uncertainty. Research consistently shows that people overestimate their own knowledge and their ability to predict future events. In calibration studies, when participants say they are 90% certain of an answer, they are typically correct only around 75% of the time. This gap between confidence and accuracy has serious consequences in professional domains. Surgeons, for example, have been shown to overestimate survival rates for complex procedures by a notable margin. Overconfidence also fuels excessive trading in financial markets, where investors believe they can consistently outperform the market despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Finally, let's consider some strategies for improving decision-making under uncertainty. One promising approach comes from the field of structured decision analysis, which encourages people to decompose a complex problem into smaller, more manageable components. Rather than relying on a single intuitive judgment, this method forces decision-makers to evaluate each element separately, which tends to reduce bias. Another effective technique is the use of a premortem exercise. In a premortem, a team imagines that a project has already failed and then works backwards to identify what might have gone wrong. This approach directly counteracts overconfidence by compelling people to consider potential failures before they commit to a course of action. Research by psychologist Gary Klein found that premortems can increase the ability to identify threats by approximately 30%. To sum up, then, our decisions under uncertainty are shaped by reference points, mental shortcuts, and systematic overconfidence. But by understanding these cognitive tendencies and applying structured techniques, we can significantly improve the quality of the choices we make. Next week, we'll look at group dynamics and how uncertainty affects collective decision-making.
That is the end of section 4. You now have some time to check your answers to section 4. That is the end of the IELTS listening test. You now have some time to transfer your answers to the answer sheet.
Before you go, Don't forget to like this video, share it with other test takers, and subscribe so you never miss your daily IELTS and CELPEEP tests. Drop your score in the comments. Your name could be featured in our monthly Achievers newsletter. Stay consistent, stay focused, and keep leveling up with MasterPrep.